Remember that mankind was created with freedom of choice. All totalitarian regimes deny this, and they will collapse one day. I advise you to turn your attention to China. The leaders of many countries who have been elected in a so-called democratic fashion just do as they like once they're in power. A typical example is the French government, which is still carrying out nuclear testing in the Pacific and polluting with radiation the last great resource we have left, namely the ocean. I already know from a reliable source that the French scientists in Mururoa are very concerned about the gigantism that affects some species of fish, particularly the parrotfish, which has been subjected to atomic radiation in the area around Mururoa. These fish have grown to 3 times their natural size. Let's hope the same doesn't happen to the great white shark, which is found in our waters. Furthermore, if you carefully follow the dates of the underwater explosions at Mururoa, you will notice that in the hours later, but more commonly 2 to 4 days after the event, there is always a large-scale earthquake somewhere on the planet, following the explosion, of course. French politicians have thus been committing a crime on a planetary scale for several decades. I'm sorry and ashamed to have been born French. Saddam Hussein also committed a crime against the planet when he set light to hundreds of oil wells. He should also be tried for the atrocities he committed in Kuwait. What is the United Nations doing about it? In Brazil, the governments that are systematically destroying the Amazon rainforests and their own next generation are also committing a crime on a planetary scale. The people who say that the system must change are doing nothing about it. Everybody's grumbling about the bad penal system we have. Of course it is bad, but the laws appear to have been made in favour of crooks, so do something about it. Remember the penal system of the Bacaratinians. It wasn't unlike the Aztec system, which was excellent because of its efficiency. It isn't enough to say that the system is bad, they should change it. They? Whom do they mean by they? The parliamentarians, the heads of state, all those elected by the people, by you. In order to change the system, the laws must change along with their leaders. You must force the politicians who represent you to change their inefficient laws, the inefficient system, once and for all. The politicians are generally too idle to undertake the task on their own. Each law requires a great deal of work and responsibility, and that's often too much to ask, because, as I've said, most of them are there for the prestige and big salary. Incidentally, if you want to attract good politicians, start by cutting their salary to that of a suburban bank manager, and you'll find that there are fewer applicants, but those who remain will be sincere human beings and genuinely want to do something for the people. You are the people who voted for these politicians, and most of you have had enough. They haven't done what you expected them to do for our country. Someday the time will come when the citizens must force them to do their jobs, to fulfill the promises they made to the majority who elected them before the election. When there is no other solution, ordinary citizens can force politicians to do their duty. They must. Careful, we are not talking about anarchy here, just discipline. In a country you need the discipline, not of a totalitarian regime, but of a democracy in which promises are kept. If promises are broken, it's up to you to act, because it is abhorrent that politicians disappoint millions of people when they're in power and fool people until the next election. These eminent politicians would be better off doing their jobs rather than spending 80% of their time arguing amongst themselves over internal party politics. People say to you, what can we do? There's nothing we can do. And that is exactly where they are wrong. Ordinary people can and must force the government elected by the people and by referendum to carry out the tasks for which they were elected. Ordinary people possess enormous power. As Archie said, one of the greatest weapons that humans possess, thanks to their intelligence, is the power of inertia. It is a non-violent force, and that is best, as violence breeds more violence. Christ said, "He who lives by the sword dies by the sword." In Beijing, China, a man on his own and unarmed was able to stop a tank with his presence alone. How did he achieve that? Because the soldiers in the tank didn't dare run him over. They were enthralled by the self-sacrificing act of the unarmed man. Millions of people witnessed it on television. Gandhi managed on his own to prevent terrible bloodshed. Lord Mountbatten himself realized that if he'd sent 50,000 troops to Calcutta, They would have been massacred, and yet Gandhi, one man, averted a massacre through non-violent means. Once, in Arki's planet, they blocked the roads with so-called broken-down vehicles. There were 10,000 of them. The police contingent knew it was done on purpose, but they couldn't do anything about it. When the fire brigade or an ambulance had to pass, the people arranged to let them through by pushing their vehicles out of the way. They then pushed them back to where they were. That is the power of inertia. They didn't move, didn't eat, didn't scream. They were silent, confronting the forces of law and order. Obviously, they said they would be more than happy to clear the road, but how could they without mechanics? The country was paralyzed. They had no banners, no slogans. There was no shouting or yelling, just quiet defiance. They waited to hear from their adversary, who was sinking deeper and deeper into his lies and deceitfulness. A letter had already been sent to the government, which was well aware of their demands and knew why they were there. The name of the person who sent the letter was Mr. Citizen. As Arki said, when 100,000 people calmly lie down on a tarmac, a railway line, or in the streets and say to the police, "I want to go home, please take me home, I'm ill, I beg you to take me home," the police couldn't possibly hurl tear gas into a crowd of sick people for no reason, could they? With the power of inertia, the people brought the entire nation to a standstill without violence. The outcome was quick to follow. The fat financiers who carried much financial control in the business world, the stock market crash, the rise and fall of gold prices, and were in cahoots with the corrupt politicians, started to panic because they stood to lose millions of dollars in the market. For every coin the people in the street lost by not working, they were losing hundreds of thousands. So in the name of their sacred money, they had to do something, and the people won. Little by little, you're being conditioned. That's what our extraterrestrial friends are concerned about. You're a human being, not a robot. Wake up now. Have you ever wondered, just to give you an example, what would happen if the electricity went out in a supermarket with new cash registers, the new barcode system of recording prices? The checkout assistants wouldn't even be able to add up the goods. The codes on most articles would make it an impossible task. Has it ever crossed your mind that encoding stops you, the consumer, from knowing the price of a tin of baked beans, unless you go through the list you're given? But that's an arduous task, so you're less and less aware of how much you're spending, and imperceptibly the financiers take control of your own money. I knew a charming little shopkeeper who had a problem with his cash register. I arrived while it was being repaired. He sold me 2 articles at $1.38 each. It took him about 3 minutes to work out the total on a piece of paper, and he ended up giving me $2.34 change from the $5 I'd handed him, simply because he'd lost the habit of making such a simple addition even on paper. He trusts the machine, as do thousands of others like him. People put their trust in credit cards and computers. They're wrong because imperceptibly they are no longer thinking for themselves. They're letting the financiers add up for them. Imperceptibly, they're no longer in control. Let's do a little experiment together, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Are you ready? Right. A few lines up, I did an addition for you and explained that I'd bought $2.76 worth of goods and that the shopkeeper handed me $2.34 in change from $5. Fortunately, you weren't the shopkeeper, as I would have made you lose 10 cents. I did that deliberately to catch you out. If, however, you are among those who stopped when reading the paragraph to check the sum, then that indicates that you're not easily led. If you fall into the second category of those who didn't check, you'd better change your attitude now. You're a human being, containing a divine fragment. Be proud of it, and stop behaving like a sheep. You've already listened to this book to the end. That's wonderful in itself. Wonderful? Yes, because that shows that you are interested in more than just your steak and chips, hamburger, sauerkraut, or a glass of beer. So there you go. What I have to say next is directly aimed at the millions of young people around the world. Everything Tao asked me to write, and of course everything I've just added, apply equally to young people, but I want to add a message specially for them. My friends, the great number of you who have lost hope, are unemployed, bored, or packed into towns. Why don't you radically change your lifestyle? Instead of stagnating in unhealthy environments, you can organize yourselves along a completely different path. Here, I'm talking about Australia in particular, as I don't exactly know what sorts of resources other countries have. However, the fundamentals could undoubtedly apply to all countries. Get together, organize yourselves, and ask the government to lease cultivatable land to you on a 99-year contract. There is such land available, believe me. That way, you can create communal farms where you'll be self-sufficient. You'll have the satisfaction and pride of proving to those around you that you're not bludgers, that you're doing even better than a nation. You could even set up a country with your own rules and internal disciplines, while still respecting those of the country you live in. I'm convinced that a good government would happily give you a push in the right direction. It wastes so much money anyway, that for once it would be giving out money for a great cause. Of course, you'll have to act responsibly, because all the disparagers will be ready to pounce on you, since they're convinced you're no-hopers. Personally, I have complete faith in you. Faith that you, the young generation, will build a better world, cleaner and more spiritual. Is the message of the Thiaooubans not addressed to you? Hence, you must prove to be responsible and create your own rules. No drugs for a start, because as you know, drugs are disturbing your astral body, which is your real self, and you don't need them at all. Those of you whose friends have fallen into that trap will find a way out with your help if they want. You have a huge job ahead of you, not only in helping your peers, but also in recognizing your lives along the new path. You will thereby discover untold joys. From a material perspective, you will make a return to nature, and you will be the first to do this seriously. What do you need for your survival? Air, water, bread, vegetables and meat? You can achieve all those things on your own, and without using chemical products again. The Israeli kibbutz functions perfectly. You may function even better, because in Australia, you're multicultural. Still, it's not a question about doing others. It's a question of living well and with self-respect. Then, on the spiritual and entertainment side, you'll have your own discos. A disco is just as much fun in the open countryside as in a town, you know. Your own libraries, your own theatres, where you'll be able to create and perform your own plays. There'll be chess, table tennis, tennis, bowls, billiards, soccer, netball, archery, fencing, sailboarding, horse riding, surfing, fishing, the list goes on. Some may prefer classical dancing, others martial arts. You'll avoid violent games that engender too much animosity. You can see that there are countless things you can do in nature, many more than on some street corner in any town. Your physical and spiritual well-being will benefit greatly from yoga. I'd like to insist on this discipline, and especially on the breathing through the chakras. 30 minutes of yoga every morning and night would be perfect. You are the new generation, and most of you have understood that you must go with nature and the environment and not against it. Most of the idiots who go against nature will criticize you when you demonstrate with good cause for the preservation of trees. They pejoratively call you a greenie or a hippie. Prove to the whole world, and mainly to yourselves, that you can practice what you preach, because when you start working on your communal farm, you'll be able to do even more to preserve the environment. You'll be able to create forests. Choose from among your groups some responsible people, not bosses or masters, but responsible people, advisors, who'll be elected democratically. I'm convinced that you'll be able to show the whole world that you can do a better job than nations led by shady politicians. And in the name of the universe, I thank you. Tao told you that religion and politics are two of the worst banes of society. Therefore, if you intend to inundate my publisher with letters that you want me to answer, or with the suggestion that I become your guru or create a religion, think again. You'll be going against my will, as well as the will of the Thiaooubans and Tao, and you won't get anywhere. Tao told you the greatest temple of man is inside him. It is there that he can communicate at any time with the Creator, his Creator, using meditation and concentration through the intermediary of his higher self. Don't speak to me about building temples, churches, cathedrals, ashrams, or anything else. Look inside yourself, and you'll notice that you possess everything you need to communicate with him, simply because it is he who placed it there. Finally, I'd like to finish by saying this. As the humble servant of Tao and the Taorai, who requested that I write this work, I want to remind you for the last time that whatever religion there is, and whether you believe in one thing or another, that will in no way change what has been established by the Great Spirit, God the Creator. You can call him what you like. No religion, no belief, and no book, not even this one, will affect the truth and the order established by him in the universe. Rivers will always flow from their source towards the ocean, even if a religion, a sect, or billions of people want to believe the opposite. The only true, immutable thing is the law of the Creator, the one he wanted in the beginning, the universal law, his law, and absolutely nobody will ever be able to change that. Michel Desmarquet, Cairns, Australia, April 1993.